For this video, we are going to be talking about digital tools in writing, and not just in writing, but also in reading, because we know reading and writing are so very connected. On this slide, we have our objectives for this short video. We're going to talk about using digital tools for skill support or for communication, because there's two different ways we can go with those digital tools. And we're going to think about different ways that digital text convey meaning through links and icons, etc., which was a very fascinating thing to be thinking about. I hadn't realized how much our understanding of how to navigate literacy has changed because of the internet and computers. And we'll talk about media literacy in terms of different genres of reading and writing that we've already studied. So in this particular slide, I am really thinking about how do we make meaning out of digital text, and how is that different from our old technology. Our old technology is that we used paper, and we had letters, and we had sounds, and that, you know, we did phonics, and we could write things down with a pencil, and we could use an eraser, and that was how we did it. And that is not how we do it today. Even if you're reading something on a Kindle, for example, or a digital book, if I come to a word that I don't know, I can press it with my finger and it'll bring me up a dictionary and a definition. And that is not something that we used to have. If you were reading a book, if you wanted to look something up in the dictionary, you actually had to get a dictionary. You might have to get up and move. So it's just really interesting. So that's our old technology. Newer technology is kind of over here. There are all of these things that we need to understand when we're looking at text on a computer screen or on our phones on an app. And one is that anything that's underlined, like here where the laser pointer is pointing, that means if you click that, you're going to go to another place. It's like being transported. You go from here and you can go look at something else somewhere else. And that's not something, it didn't used to be that underlined text would actually take you to a different location. And then also there's a lot of non-linear navigation that happens. In books, you start at the beginning and you go and you read to the end, or maybe you can kind of flip back and forth and look at the beginning and the end. But when we have computerized, app-based navigation, we have to understand that when you look at something like this, and this is a screenshot from the SSU website. If you want to find information about Sonoma State University, you could click the button that says Explore, Apply, Visitors, Give. I love that that's one of the ones. Sure, give more money to the university, or log in, or you can do a search. And there isn't one straight way to navigate through information about the university. Any website you go to is going to have these sort of menus, and we as readers need to understand that when you click one of these, a bunch of other options will open up, and then we can continue to kind of look through. And I just find that really fascinating that no two people who would go to the Sonoma State website or any website are going to have the same experience. Whereas if anyone wants to open up and read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and you start at the beginning and it has that great first line about it's a truth universally acknowledged, and everyone is going to get that, and everyone is going to go through the story in about the same way. Whereas if that book became a website, maybe you would have, Pemberley, Longbourn, etc. If you don't read Jane Austen, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So context matters. I also thought it was really interesting, and, again, things I haven't really thought about, I don't know, maybe you have thought about them, that we have all these icons now, and those icons have meaning. Just like when we see the letter D, and we know that D says D, these icons, and this is a screenshot from Google, from the Google Drive, each of these icons has a meaning, and when you know what that meaning is, you know that if you click that picture, you're going to find something out. This little wheel, this has come to have that meaning of settings. So you can change the settings. The question mark is where you get help. Sometimes people refer to this as the hamburger, this box of 9 dots. When you click on that, you can find all the other Google tools. But you'll see this same kind of sometimes you'll see this as straight lines, and sometimes you'll see it as 9 dots. And basically that's telling you that there's a whole other menu of other places that you can go. This one helps you change the view of your drive. And I don't even remember what information gives you, so I would have to go click it. But for us, we need to understand, and if people don't have digital literacy, they're not going to understand these different pictures actually have a meaning, actually communicate something you, actually help you figure out where you're going. And then another one, and people like me who are old, maybe we're not so good at this as some younger people, but emojis are a language of their own now, and we can make meaning of these images. And this is just a little screenshot of someone's text message conversation. Looks like they're getting ready to eat. Or maybe they weren't feeling good after they ate all of those things. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm sure maybe you've had some experience with this, but all of these things and more are a different way of making meaning digitally than in a book or on a paper. And that means that when we're teaching students to read and write using digital media, we have to be giving them more information about how to understand and make meaning from what they're looking at. So that's a whole 21st century way of being literate. And then we have a media literacy, which is another really important thing that we need to be thinking about for our students. That we know that in this time of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, there's all kinds of ways that we are presented with information, and what tools do we have to understand whether that information is correct? Is this fake news? Is this propaganda? Is this real? And so one of the things we need to be doing as teachers is to be teaching this idea of media literacy. So a huge part of that is this idea of critical thinking, that when you read something, you don't just automatically believe that it's true. We have to evaluate sources and claims. And this is something we can be teaching this with media by using Facebook and all of the things that come on the internet. But we also could be teaching critical thinking skills if you're in a history class and you're evaluating primary source documents. You could teach critical thinking and media literacy when people read science studies that say that you should, you've seen all the studies about chocolate, and some studies about chocolate, they say it's really good for your body and it has all these positive effects. And then there are all these other scientific studies that say chocolate is really bad for body and it has all these other effects. And how do you evaluate the sources? Was that something that came out of the cocoa industry trying to make you think that it's good for you? Or so thinking about where is the source, who is making this claim, is really hard. And that kind of leads me into this idea about being connected. When we're talking about media literacy, we're not only talking about evaluating media sources. That is everything. So when we're teaching students about persuasive and argumentative essays, that would be a perfect time to include media literacy in that conversation. That comparing sources is always a relevant skill. Who said it? Why did they say it? Why did they think that? Another part of media literacy is awareness of how media influences us in our society. And as I record this, there is a war in Ukraine that has been brought by Vladimir Putin in Russia, and there is a lot of propaganda around that war, and how we believe about those things is shaped by what we perceive, what comes at us. So my final point on this slide is that it's really empowering to have media literacy. Once you understand how to consume and create media, you have some power. And that just makes you a better citizen of the world. If you want to know more about any of this that I've talked about, this is actually a link to a media literacy organization where they're trying to help teachers teach children how to engage with media literacy. So if you're looking at this slide on Canvas, you'll be able to click that link and go check out that website. I think another thing, sort of moving away from digital media literacy, is thinking about these tools. We have all of these great tools, and I think that all tools that we have are only as good as what we use them for. So my question to you is, what is your objective for the use of digital tools? When you're teaching kids to use these tools, when you're allowing them to use these tools, what is the purpose? What is the objective? And for me, they break out into two sides. One side is this idea about skill support. So digital tools are really great for spell check. You can use speech to text, Grammarly, and other apps are there that will help you correct your tone and your grammar. Word processing has made a huge difference in being able to cut and paste and track changes and make it feel less daunting to change what you've written. And we'll get in another video, we'll get into revising and evaluating work. So that's kind of one side of digital literacy. It's the very foundational skills, the skills-based support. And then the other side of using digital tools is to remember that always when we are reading and when we are writing, it is social and it is communication. And so we can teach our students about all these things. And you read in the text about using blogs and social media, how to help kids use presentation tools like we've been doing in this class all semester, where you make a Google slideshow or you make an infographic. We can teach kids about peer revision, which we'll talk about in another video also. We can teach kids about nonlinear forms, but I want to come back always to this idea about authenticity and relevance. When we are using these digital literacy tools and digital tools for reading and writing, we need to bring authenticity and relevance to our discussion, that we are trying to communicate something, and that's important, and we're trying to get a message across, and we're trying to receive a message. And if you can situate that in something that's real, that the students are writing for an actual audience, not just for the teacher, not just for a grade, that is going to provide additional richness and motivation to engage. And I think just as I kind of finish up here, what I want to talk about is using what you have. So technology is expensive, obviously, and what you have is what you're going to use. So one of the things I really love, Google, it's the corporation that's taking over our lives, but I also really appreciate that they are providing a lot of those tools for free. It does make me wonder a little bit, what are they trying to get out of us? What information are they collecting? How are they using that against us? See, that's a kind of media literacy thing. But we don't need to necessarily buy fancy packages for reading and writing. What Google gives us for free is something that we can teach kids to use and that kids will have access to. If you have a smartphone, if you have a Chromebook, which is, just a cheap computer, you're able to get onto Google Docs, Google Slides. You don't have to pay for them the way that we used to have to pay for Microsoft Word, which costs so much money that no one wanted to use it. So think about what's available. Think about what you would buy if you could and why you need that. I really want you to think about social elements that you would be interested in trying with your students. That idea about quad blogging, where they put 4 classrooms together from around the world so that the students can write for an audience of other kids their age that live in other places and then get feedback from them. So there's this authentic communication. If I were still teaching in elementary or secondary school, I probably would be really interested in using quad blogging. What are you interested in trying out with your kids? And that last question there is, how do you combine grade level literacy expectations with digital tools? So obviously, if you're teaching persuasive or argumentative writing, there are a lot of ways that you can bring in media from the internet, from YouTube, from TikTok. How can you look at those Common Core state standards and bring the digital tools in? And I think I have to keep this slide for attribution. I am finished with this one. Thank you very much. I will see you later.